Magdi Clan Report. Welcome our guest, the popular Ian Hernon, Deputy Editor of Tribune. Welcome.
Thank you, Adel.
Lovely day, first day of the spring.
Yep.
You can see the Prime Minister yesterday, so the Prime Minister on Wednesday met the Prime Minister of Canada.
Yep.
In the garden now, Downing Street. You remember when his father met Margaret Thatcher?
Well, Pierre, yes.
Yeah,
I do.
Pierre.
Yeah, I was there, actually.
You were there, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And we didn't have the gates on number 10 Downing Street.
No.
So you
No.
can walk and...
That's true.
Remember, when did the gates came up? After the IRA?
It was after a taxi bomb got into number 10.
Which would be 1990?
Oh, just before that, I think.
Yeah, 1989.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Commonwealth, it's almost certain now that Prince of Wales going to be the next head of the Commonwealth.
Good luck to him.
Why? You disapprove?
Well, no, good luck to him.
No, but I think because the Queen's father was the first head and the Queen, then Prince of Wales, it might become tradition.
Yes.
Although it's not a written law.
And there's very little that Prince Charles can do to mess up the Commonwealth, I don't think. Although he'll probably try his best.
Well, he was wearing the straw skirts when he went to Australia and well, New Zealand fell out. Well, speaking of the Commonwealth and the migrants, what we call the Windrush, which were the subject between the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition in the House of Commons. Is it actually the whole blame? But let's explain what happened with this story, how the story started. Explain to our viewers.
Well, what happened with the Windrush generation is that a few years after the Second World War, there was a serious shortage of skills. And West Indians, Jamaicans in particular,
were invited to come in.
Were invited because they were brilliant at, during the RAF, during the Battle of Britain and afterwards, they were famous for being as mechanics and engineers. So, you know, you get a Spitfire.
So they came and worked as mechanic in the factories,
and they came over, and then their wives and then their daughters became nurses and all that sort of thing. And we're talking about a period from 1947-8 to 1952 or 53. Now, all those people who were welcomed and we wanted, they then had children who are now in their 40s, 50s, even 60s.
And 50s, that's 50,000 of those children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they assumed they were British.
The Prime Minister on Wednesday said they are British.
But because of a classic Home Office shambles, it probably only affects a few hundred people.
Yeah.
But the impact on those few hundred families is horrendous.
Horrendous, yeah.
In terms of, some of them are approaching
Let's explain to the
retirement.
viewers again that the children didn't have passports because they came on their parents' passport.
That's right.
And they filled the landing cards.
Yeah.
And there were so many of them, and someone in the Home Office decided to destroy this landing cards.
Well, Theresa May was technically right. The broad policy decision was in 2009, the tail end of Gordon Brown's government. But that was just a broad decision. They were without any idea of the consequences. Now, Adele, you know that when any government, left or right, makes a broad decision, it takes 2 or 3 years to actually implement it. Now, as far as we can work out, all the landing cards and various documentations were shredded in 2010, 2011. And who was the Home Secretary then?
The Prime Minister.
Yeah.
I hope she's listening and watching now, because we're going to take a break and come back after this break. Stay with us. Come back to you. And back to our guest. Thank you for staying with us, Ian. The research, we're just saying the research in King's College, genetic research, found that the blondes are more attractive to gentlemen, like the old movie. Gentlemen prefer blondes. And so the many more have more children. But the funny thing is, it was in all the papers on Monday and Tuesday, and then when we Doug, we found that the Daily Mail has actually published it 4 months ago. Why the other papers didn't make the same fuss then? Why? As a Fleet Street man.
Well, this happens all the time.
You mean the recycling?
There is nothing so new as an old story.
So recycling that. I remember once, actually, someone embarrassing me, going to the library cutting we had up in the newspaper. So indignant. And so, who actually wrote this rubbish? And they put it in front of my face and said, see the byline. Guess whose byline it was?
Yours?
Of course.
Well, on the blonde issue, well, I married a blonde 44 years ago.
Right.
In the days when I used to be red.
Well,
which I'm not now.
You know what? I mean, you know, if you married blonde and she stayed with you 44 years, we should add that blondes have more patience than camels.
You could say that.
She stayed with
And
you
she would say that.
Well, actually, all my girlfriends were blondes, and all my first 2 wives, the last one was brunettes.
Too much information.
Well, yeah, I'm just proving that I'm equal opportunity gentleman.
Okay.
Right. Now, on a more serious subject, the vote on Syria. What was this all about? The leader of the opposition voting against a motion that he put himself?
Well, as you know, I'm a left-wing journalist and
That's
Labour
why I put you on the
supporter
left
and
here.
all that sort of thing. But on the narrow issue, I think Theresa May was right. Thank goodness. So far, the bombing last weekend was very focused, very low-level stuff. Now, that's the sort of thing any Prime Minister, or President for that matter, should be allowed to take those instant decisions over fast-moving circumstances.
Right, yeah.
A vote on a proper war, well, actually, now I think of it, it was Tony Blair, who's now hated all over, particularly on the left, but it was him who actually started the precedent of having a parliamentary vote before you go to war.
Can I just add a little bit here of
You're going to tell me I'm wrong then, are you?
No, I'm not going to say you are wrong at all. I'm going to say it's such a continuous tradition, but wasn't Lady Thatcher Falkland, which was more than 35 years ago,
No,
30
I
years ago?
remember it vividly.
Yeah, she recalled Parliament. It was a Saturday.
I know. I remember being dragged into Parliament on a
Exactly.
Saturday,
So she,
on my birthday, which was
right.
outrageous.
well, saved you buying food and drinks. But Lady Thatcher did actually with the Falkland War, although the Falkland was straightforward self-defense under Article 52.
Yes. Well, the Falklands
51,
War
sorry.
was a very bloody little war. People forget that.
Yes. Yeah.
But it was not quite at the same scale, and no one expected it to be as bloody as it was.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite
Yeah.
in the same
But
scale as
Blair
Iraq
actually
or
was-
Afghanistan.
With war like Afghanistan, we were launching on the foreign country.
Yeah.
And that is. So, okay, so where we stand now, where do Labour stand? Labour seem to be against their leader that Parliament should not be consulted except, although people like Hilary Benn and all of that wanted. I'm confused about where Labour stand, honestly.
Well, as you know, Labour is a great party and I'm a full supporter of it.
Of course, your magazine.
But if you ask me where Labour stands at the moment, under Jeremy, Labour stands there, and there, and there.
and sits there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so there's a confusion over Labour. But it's not healthy for our democracy.
No, it's not.
It's not healthy. I know your magazine is actually stopping for a little pause, but have you been critical or fully supporting of Jeremy Corbyn in the...
My paper's policy is to be a friendly critic.
Right, okay.
We're not slavish supporters, or rather I'm not a slavish supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. But neither am I a Blairite or a moderate or what.
Actually, again, Tribune magazine is a very democratic magazine because they always ask me to write. Quite a lot of times. Although I write actually in Russia and the Crimea. Okay, and again, where do Labour stand on the dispute with Russia, speaking of Russia?
Sorry, on the...
Speaking of Russia also, where do actually Labour stand on Russia?
Well, again, it's quite confusing.
Yes, confusing.
I mean, Jeremy wears a red hat.
Right.
And is against foreign despots poisoning people in this country.
And, yeah.
Apart from Putin, who can do whatever he wants.
But
No, talking seriously, it is a very fractious and difficult issue. I mean, Jeremy is he's actually older than me, but sometimes he seems to be stuck into the early 70s. His attitude to Israel, Palestine, Soviet Union, which actually collapsed
yes,
best part of 30 years ago. He's still stuck in that groove.
Actually, the accusation of anti-Semitism, which is all over the paper, I mean, the Telegraph this week had one from your sort of part of the world MPs you covered. There she was in tears because she's Jewish.
Well, this has been an issue of serious debate on my sort of centre-left side of the party.
Of the party, but is it because they stuck in the Cold War mentality, Israel, Palestine, Soviet Union, America versus the East?
Well, again, it's a generational thing, and I was one myself in the early 70s. In those days, if you remember, anything the Palestinians did was good. Anything the Israelis did was bad.
Yes.
Now, sometimes there were good reasons for thinking that, and sometimes bad reasons.
Yeah.
But we all know that time
Nothing's
moves
black
on.
and white like that.
Yeah, and it gets quite complicated.
Thank you very much, Ian. Nothing black and white. That's why I came in these different colors today. Ian, and I thank you very, very much for honoring us with your presence.
It's a pleasure.
That's all what we have, and see you next week.